Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV for today, Tuesday, April 21st. Thanks for joining us. Having another great week here doing TechStrong TV. We've got a lot of good stuff coming this week to show you. We hope you're enjoying the broadcast and it's helping you stay abreast of tech and stay off of the bad news networks for what's going on and making it happen. You know what else, though, we realize, and especially over this past weekend and yesterday and talking to people, you got to count your blessings. Though there's been plenty of layoffs in the tech industry, and I've had more than several friends, acquaintances, colleagues reach out to me if I know of any openings or who may be hiring. For the most part, we're very lucky that we have had, the ability to work from home, continue our jobs, and make money. So it is good that we are in tech for this, and it's part of this whole TechStrong thing, right? There's a commercial that's going to run for our TechStrong conference coming out on the 4th of June, which we'd love for you to attend. We've got some great speakers lined up. It's why we're doing TechStrong TV every day. So please check that out, and we'll go from there. Okay, in terms of what we have on for today, I've got a really good interview I did with Anders Wahlgren, VP of Technology and Strategy at CloudBees. And Anders and I dove pretty deep into software-defined management, SDM, which is this whole category of functionality and tools that CloudBees has been working on now for a while. And Anders gives us peels back the kimono a little bit and gives us some good information there. After that, from our archives, I'm going back to a show we did in Israel last year. It was a great show. It was the first time it was done. It was called Yalla DevOps. It was put on in the city of Herzliya in Israel. And the JFrog folks really sponsored it, though it was a community event. And this is from Yalla DevOps. It's a nice conversation I had with Shlomi Ben Hayim. And what I liked about it is it really gives an insight into Shlomi's view of community and how it plays into a successful strategy in today's DevOps and software landscape. After Shlomi's interview, it is Tuesday, and our friend John Willis has two really A-star interviews for today. The first is with our friend Damon Edwards of Rundeck. John and Damon talk for a bit, and they're from the DevOps Cafe podcast as well. They're pretty comfortable talking to each other, and Damon's always has some great insight and stuff to say. So stay tuned for that. And then following that, Andrew Clay Schaefer, who's John's colleague at Red Hat now, and also Andrew, one of the DevOps pioneers, one of the co-founders of Puppet, among other things. So John and Andrew have a great conversation. That one runs about 45 minutes, so they really jump into it and invite you to check that out. After that, I'll be back with the news, and then we'll go over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene is going to be playing an interview with Eitan Worcel, Senior Product Manager, App Security at HCL. She's going to talk about interactive application security scanning. And then we go over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. It's Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell always has good stuff on a daily basis, so please stick around for that one. And then I'll be back to close things up. So it's going to be a great day here. You don't want to miss the John Willis interviews, Damon Edwards, Andrew Clay Schaefer. But we'll be right back after this word from our sponsors.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong. featuring John Bachagalupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Okay, back here in the studio. You know, I first met Anders Wahlgren when he was CTO of Electric Cloud, and I had a great, good couple of years of interviewing Anders and got to know him pretty well, doing webinars together, hanging out at conferences, you know, raising a glass or two. And he's a really bright guy, Anders, and an interesting fellow as well, and a fun guy, nice guy to hang out with. Anyway, with CloudBees' acquisition of Electric Cloud, you know, Anders moved from the CTO role to VP Technology and Strategy. But more than that, Anders was has become a point person in developing the CloudBees strategy around software-defined management, SDM. And it's part of this bigger picture of how CloudBees views the world of SDM, and I think it's SDA. But in any event, I had a chance to catch up with Anders last week, and here's my conversation with Anders Wahlgren of CloudBees.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, our next guest, as I mentioned, is my friend Anders Wahlgren, VP of Technology Strategy at CloudBees. Anders, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Great to be here. It's always fun to join you and chat with you.
Absolutely. Of course, we usually chat in person on the conference circuit, and it's been, I think the last time we did that was DevOps World in Lisbon in December, late November, and hopefully we'll see each other again soon. Though we'll talk maybe a little later in our interview about when that might be and what do you think the future of in-person conferences are. But right now, Anders, I wanted to focus on a couple things. First of all, I wanted to ask how you, your family, your colleagues are doing, you know, during the obvious what's going on here with COVID and all of that.
We're all hanging in there. You know, I think we're fortunate as a company that a lot of us work from home already. So we're kind of prepared for that sort of emotion. Obviously, that we're lucky to be in that position. There's a lot of us who, are still out working in stores and hospitals and all of those kinds of things. And obviously, we're lucky and know it. But it hasn't honestly been that huge of a shift for us because this is what we normally do. Obviously, travel is non-existent right now, so you and I are not doing this in person as we often would. But someday we will, and that's good. But we're lucky, both that we're already kind of in that mode of everybody works in a distributed fashion, and obviously lucky to be in a position where we're able to do this. But things are going fine.
So one of the interesting things, though, is you're right. In tech, we probably have a higher preponderance of people who work from home. But, tech's a big word for 4 letters. And I want to just focus in on really the software developer, DevOps kind of people. Because if there's one area of tech where that camaraderie and that constant flow of information and communication really facilitate doing the job, it's the developer and DevOps folks, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things that we've seen over just the last few years has been just how good we're getting at collaborating and how good we're getting at collaborating over time, over distance, across organizations, all of those sorts of things. And I think we're seeing the benefits of that kind of collaboration and the quality and the amount of software that's being delivered. Of course, I would say still we're in the early days. We're in the early days of doing this better. There's a lot of organizations that are having a tough time kind of making that shift. Not just these days during the sort of all the pandemic sort of situation, but just in general. It's a heavy lift and it's a lot of work and it's people, process, culture, and it takes time.
Absolutely. But I will tell you, I again, one of the silver linings that I think will come out of this is we're going to learn how to do this better, right? And as time goes by, we'll innovate, we'll improvise, we'll learn, and we'll synthesize. And I think it'll be better in the long run. We'll all be maybe better for it in the long run. I'm not trying to blow smoke here, but
Yeah, no, I know. I think
it's true.
I think it's important to look for silver linings. Especially during a time like this. I think what this kind of does is a wise friend of mine once said, "It's not the backup strategy that matters; it's the restore strategy." You can have all the backups in the world, but if the tapes are bad or blank or incomplete, you're hosed. I've worked with a lot of customers over the years who have to deal, by regulatory necessity, if not just because it's a good idea, with the idea of business continuity and those sorts of things. And the ones that are really good at it are the ones that they don't wait for the disaster to do the failover, right? There's one bank that we worked with where they have 3 data centers that they rotate through, and I think it's a quarterly basis. So they don't have like the data center and the failover. They just have data centers.
Absolutely.
And obviously, for those of us that are building things in the cloud, that's more of a familiar and much more easily done concept.
Well, that was one of the reasons for the cloud, right? Was to have that kind of move. It's funny. The company that I started before Media Ops that I helped found was called Still Secure, but the real name was Lattice Networks. And the idea behind it was that as we moved to distributed applications, this was back in 2000, 2001, Anders, it was a little early, but as we moved to distributed applications, we would have the ability to do that, right? To move our applications public cloud to private cloud, from this continent to that continent, and it's come true now. It's 20 years later, and we do see that, and it's a good thing, right? And again, it's a
very good thing, and I think I think a lot of us are discovering where the cracks are right now, as it becomes tremendously difficult, if not next to impossible, to send somebody on site to do something. So if you've got a piece of your pipeline or your software delivery lifecycle that's not automatable and that needs the human touch and can't be done remotely, you're in a tough position with respect to that piece of the puzzle right now. So we're finding those things out the hard way.
Yeah, someone once told me you never find your cracks until they're really stressed, right? And this is a good time to stress them.
No battle plan ever survives contact with the enemy.
No, exactly. That's exactly, yeah. It was a general or something. Anyway, Anders, I wanted to, there's a lot we can talk about COVID, and maybe in the next couple of weeks we can have you on again and how it's changing and shaping maybe the face of software delivery management. There's that word I was looking for, right? But that's what I wanted to talk to you about, software delivery management, right? And CloudBees calls it SDM, and you are kind of heading up the SDM team there, right?
I've been working very closely with that team and doing a fantastic job. I think really what we're trying to do with software delivery management as a category is really acknowledge that software can't be sort of separate from the business anymore. For a lot of us, software is the business, and for many, if not nearly all of us, software is a part of the business. And we've done a lot of work, I would say, in the last 10, 15 years around how do we make the actual kind of software development part of it better, the writing of the code, the testing of the code, the deploying of the code, those sorts of things. And we're starting to get to the point now where, at least at the margin, we're very good at, we're getting very good at that, much better than we used to be. And what we're starting to do now is kind of broaden the scope a little bit and start to think about, well, how do we involve the rest of the stakeholders? And how do we, what are the remaining silos that we need to break down? We've done a fairly good job, again, at the margin. It's still early days in a sense for the entire industry, but at the, kind of at the high performer indexes, if you will, we've done a great job of kind of breaking down the organizational silos, a lot of the technical silos that we have, cultural silos, those sorts of things. And one of the things that we're looking at now and working on now, and it's a big component of software delivery management, is this idea that we have data silos still. So we've got tons of different platforms and tools. And one of the things that we need in order to be really good at software delivery is we need access to kind of a common data model where we have all of the data available so that we can ask questions and reason about them. And you need to be able to, and kind of in one question, talk about things like your builds and the features that you're working on, and maybe the feature flags that are involved in those, and what are the pipelines that are involved, and who are the stakeholders that need to be notified if there's a delay in this particular part of the process, and just sort of start to think about that holistically. I mean, not necessarily in too different a way than you would think about supply chain management, right? That you need to have a holistic point of view on your supply chain management, and boy, do we think about that these days, right? From a physical goods perspective. But it's equally important in software that you involve all of the stakeholders and provide that sort of common data, that leads to the universal insights that we can all kind of look at that and go, well, obviously there's a problem here. There's a bottleneck that we're encountering in this part of our process a lot. It wasn't really obvious until we looked at it from this perspective, but now we know here's something that we need to go after and make better. So that we can evolve our processes so that they're connected across the entire organization, not just the technical kind of groups, that are on the front lines of solving that problem, but also the rest of the business, and really get all functions collaborating across of this. And so I think the getting all that data in one place so that we can gain the universal insights, and then using that to drive our processes and kind of get all functions collaborating. That's SDM. That's software delivery management. It's kind of across orchestration, across automation, across continuous everything. It's really bringing us into the business in a big way, and making it less of a mystery and more of a, hey, here's all the data, here's all the policies and all of the processes and all of the collaboration that we need to do. And so we're obviously working on products in that, but we're also talking about it as a category, as a problem to be solved by the industry.
I had the benefit, I interviewed Sasha probably 2-3 weeks ago now, Anders, and we had a really good conversation where conceptually the way he laid it out for me is this whole category, if you will, of SDM, and you're right, there are multiple tools, processes, and policies and procedures and people. It's a lot of P's in there. Come into this SDM layer. But from CloudBees, how CloudBees views the world is we have this SDM layer, and that's like this whole new category you're working on. And then you have sort of the existing CloudBees tools, right, that kind of play at a layer under it. And he called that not SDM, software, SA.
We refer to that as SDA, software delivery automation. Basically.
Correct.
Think of that as kind of the factory part of the whole problem.
Mm-hmm. And so
that's obviously something that we've worked at a lot over the years in terms of automation, orchestration, Jenkins, Flow, all of the other things that we're working on. And really what we're doing here with SDM is saying, look, there's more to it than that. There's also the data that's across all of those things, between all of those tools, all of the processes that connect to each other across organizations and across functions, allowing them to collaborate effectively. So there's really a lot more to it than just automation, and that's kind of the automation guy saying that, right? So you can.
Well, the way I view it is, look, SDA is sort of the factory floor, right? That assembly line floor, or whatever you want to call it. And SDM maybe represents the management office, where we have business analysts and architects and some of the bean counters even, and other folks who are looking at what's going on the floor and saying, okay, how can we make that better, number one? And number two, how do we optimize what the output is, right? So we're going to optimize the throughput as well as optimize the output, feedback loops, right? Classic DevOps stuff, and make it better. So it's.
Yeah, and I think so far we've done a lot of kind of point optimizations, right? We look at our build cycles, we look at our test cycles, we look at our deployment cycles. We look at time to recovery, and we look at ideation to when we can get into production and all of those sorts of things. But there's a lot more data in there, right? And there's a lot more analytics that we can do, especially as we start to broaden out across, what if we involve design in this? What if we involve, all of the ideation around this and product management?
We have to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you something. What I love about this vision, Anders, is at a time where a lot of your competitors are talking about, complete DevOps, end-to-end DevOps, bringing all of this in. This way of looking at SDM sitting on top of SDA and how this encompasses this whole, it's not a process, how this encompasses this whole business, output and production is refreshing. It's different, right? And and it gives you the chance to really create this category.
I think so, and I think it's I think it's a natural evolution. I mean, I kind of go back a little bit to that supply chain analogy and think about what we spent a lot of time doing 20, 30, 40 years ago is how do we get the factory floor to be optimized, and making sure that the line is running, but it stops for the right reasons and all of those things. We kind of graduated from that to, okay, what happens before and what happens after, right? And what happens before is, well, we went to just-in-time inventory, right? So instead of having a warehouse next door, we have a supplier next door, and really they're just running stuff over as we need it. Now, that can obviously lead to a little bit of fragility when you optimize the supply chain to that extent. And if you want an interesting case study in that, go read about why we can't find toilet paper in the stores right now. It's completely a supply chain optimization problem where we optimized it to the point where we don't have enough right now.
Right, it's just in time.
Yeah, it is just in
kind of
time.
what
And all of a
most of
sudden,
us are
nobody's buying the
operating
industrial
on.
toilet paper for their offices, right? So that's part of the
Right.
reason. And then a toilet paper factory blew up in Maine today, so it got worse. But anyway, getting back to my point, and I do have one. We kind of graduated from just, okay, how do we make the factory better? How do we make the things before and the things after participate in making that better? And I think that's a little bit what SDM is saying is, look, we haven't perfected the software delivery automation. We have not by any means, perfected the factory part of this. We've got a decent handle on it, and we definitely have the tools out there. And really the next step, I think, is to broaden out and go up a little bit in terms of where we can start to really gain interesting insights into what it is we're doing at a larger level and kind of start to optimize and get good at really figuring out where do we need help? Where do we need to put resources? Where do we need more time? Where do we need more tooling? Where do we need more platforms? Where do we have cultural issues? All of those sorts of things are kind of things that we do almost by seat of the pants a lot of the time today, right? And you can get pretty far by seat of the pants, but at some point you reach the part where now you've still got hard problems where if I make an improvement here, it might be at the cost of something over here. And so it really, I think bringing all the data into one place, and instead of you having to go where the data is, instead of you having to visit, this silo or that silo to find the data so that you can pull together and answer a question that you'd like an answer to, like in front of your face every morning, as opposed to spend an hour or 2 hours every day kind of collating and, demonstrating your Excel or Google Sheets expertise after you've copied and pasted a ton of data out of 6 different tools. You really, you're not necessarily looking to replace all of those tools. What you're looking to do is put all of that data into one place so that you can then drive the insights, drive the processes, drive the collaboration out of that. And I think that is really kind of graduating a little bit out of just the automation aspect to it and into the management aspect of it. And being able to give yourselves better, more efficient knobs to turn and dials to knobs to tweak and dials to turn. I don't know, I'm mixing my metaphors or something.
We'll let it go. We'll excuse you. We get it, Anders. So let me ask you a question. What effect is COVID and all of this having on your timeline for bringing SDM to market?
I think it's having the same effect that it has on everyone, which is it slows us down. Even the most sort of lucky, privileged person where, if my biggest problem is it takes me 2 hours to go do 5 minutes of shopping, by all the preparation and going there and standing line outside and all of those things. And I'm by no means complaining. If that's as bad as it gets, I'm perfectly happy. But I think we're all struggling with, more family at home, more distractions, more important stuff happening, the simplest things in life taking a lot longer than they used to. And just the general, psychological torture of going through a global pandemic, which I don't think we would wish on anyone. That said, I think as an organization we're plowing full steam ahead, and if anything, from an introvert coder perspective, in a sense, a pandemic is a wonderful thing, because now no more phone calls, no more this or that, no more travel. You really, if you want to, can get heads down and do a lot of coding. If you can ignore the fact that there's a global pandemic going on in the background.
Right.
This is affecting everyone in drastic ways, obviously.
Absolutely. One way of ignoring the global pandemic is just to kind of bury yourself in your work and your code, or there's a lot of people doing that too. A lot of people doing that too.
There's people a lot more worse off than we are. So we definitely count ourselves lucky to be in this industry.
Every day, I give you the Lou Gehrig speech, right? I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth, right? I mean, I'm still in my office, though. It's just Paul and I, but you know what? It gets me away from body. This is the longest I've been home without traveling in 30 years.
And marriage.
Easly for me, 10 years.
Well, at least 25 years
this is
anyway.
the longest stretch of time I've had at home in a long, long time.
This is going to be a real test. But anyway.
It is. And,
she must love me, I guess. I don't know.
You really find out, sort of no pun intended, but you really do find out what's essential in life and what isn't.
Exactly.
What's
toilet paper.
What's the icing and what's the cake? There's so much of life that we complain about is icing, not cake.
Yes. I promise I will never complain about having to sit in the lounge for the airplanes again and stuff like that. You're right. Remember that. Anyway, Anders, I'm glad you checked in with us. We are going to be watching closely because we're waiting to hear of this SDM. As the tools around SDM start rolling and the whole thing, we'll be covering that really closely.
We are hard at work, and we've got previews and all of that sort of stuff happening. But yeah, it's going to be fun and exciting the next the next few years, but hopefully the next few years. So
yes,
hopefully we'll keep the comet from destroying us or something like that. I don't know what could possibly be next.
You know what? We had like a biblical rainstorm down here today, and I'm saying to myself, this is just what we need. And though we did actually need the rain, it hasn't been raining here. Anyway, Anders Wahlgren, VP Technology Strategy, Cloud Beast. Thanks for joining us here on TechStrong TV. We'll have you on soon. Stay safe and healthy. Okay? All righty.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Back here now. As I mentioned earlier, a little bit of old today come to us from Yalla DevOps, a show we did a little less than a year ago over in Israel. It was a community event sponsored by JFrog, and I had a chance to catch up with my good friend Shlomi Ben Chaim. Shlomi, of course, is the CEO, one of the co-founders of JFrog. And the reason I picked to show this one today is I really think it gives you a lot of insight into how Shlomi views how important and critical the community is, and giving back and nurturing the community is for the success of a software and tools company in today's market. So, and also Shlomi's just one of the nicest guys you'll meet in our industry. So here's my interview with Shlomi Ben Chaim in Yalla DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist at Yalla DevOps, Israel 2019.
Hello, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com on DigitalAnarchist.live, coming at you here in beautiful Herzliya by the sea. The Daniel Hotel is our sponsor, and we're here for the very first Yalla DevOps event. I'm sorry we're a little late getting started, technical difficulties, but unscheduled. We were able to grab this man to be our first guest, and who better to kick off the Yalla DevOps coverage than Shlomi Ben Chaim, CEO, founder of JFrog, and kind of the visionary behind Yalla DevOps. That's
Thank
a
you.
new one for
Good
you.
morning.
No one's ever said that to you, Shlomi.
Nobody ever said that, and
No.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are so excited to be here. I'm coming from Israel originally, and having a community event in Israel is always very exciting for me. But to see what happened here with a sold-out event that is pushed by no vendor, just by the community, with the community, and for the community, to speak about the next 12 months of DevOps, this is great. So we are very excited, and Yalla means everything. Like, Yalla, let's move.
Absolutely.
Fast forward.
So, it's the middle of the night right now in the U.S. and in Europe. It's just coming on morning. They may not know Yalla. Yalla means let's move, let's go, come on. It has a lot of meanings, but that's the essence of it. Shlomi, you mentioned not sponsored or not produced by any one sponsor. It's really by the community, for the community. And it's a community event here in Israel. What drove you to say, hey, we should get behind this, we should do this?
Yeah. Well, it's a very good question, because usually what you see is user conferences in the world of DevOps, and DevOps now it's kind of the booming thing, the darling of the enterprise software. Every company wants to be a DevOps company, so obviously a lot of vendors will also take a much more bold step toward the community. But what we realize is that the democracy of developers has some kind of power that changes the world. Think about the battle between Swarm and Kubernetes. Think about the adoption of tools. Think about REST API. Think about standards. Innovations are coming from the developers up. And yet, the community have maybe a handful of events that just give a no marketing, no sales stage, just sharing best practices with everyone. And in Israel, there was no one that was willing to kind of pick the ball. So we tried, and together with great partners, including yourself, we did the first Yalla DevOps. And as you said, Yalla means move on. It's like DevOps. It's the movement. So hopefully next year it will be even bigger.
So, my observations, right? So it's a uniquely Israeli event, though, too, right? And I think that was something you wanted to do. Is God knows we have many DevOps events throughout the world, and I go to a lot of them. So do you. But there was something you tried to capture some of that Israeli ingenuity, that drive, that it's a startup nation, right? And bring that energy to this event. How do you do that?
To be honest with you, Alan, it's actually simple. Israel considered to be the startup nation of the world. I don't know if we have more citizens or more startups in Israel.
It's close.
And by default, we are educated to think outside of Israel. Israel is an 8 million people country. You cannot build your next big enterprise software company when you look at the Israeli market. So by default, when you establish a company in Israel, you think outside of Israel. And therefore, you see a lot of developers that are practicing open source, being part of the contribution to the world, early adopters, daring to do stuff that you don't do in a 30 or 40 or 80 million people market.
Yep.
And the other big benefit is that all of us are going to the military, and it's not just in the industry that software is eating the world, it's also in
the
defense
government,
force
the military,
and
sure.
all other area. And we get some crazy real-time practicing of what it means to dare and what it means to be creative. And if I may say so, this small country is not that interesting for the big guys. They want to be in the event that you and I are going every year.
Right, exactly.
So having this huge community, having a place to come to every year and listen to you guys and say, this is the crystal ball of DevOps, this is what you should practice, this is how you can be better, and align yourself with what happened across the sea, I think it's a great benefit.
Absolutely. So let me put you on the spot. What about next year? Plans already? We'll have Yalla next year. What?
I don't know. The frogs did their magic again. I don't know if it's the frog kissed the princess or the princess kissed the frog, but we are sold
The
out.
frog kisses the frog and they turn into princes.
There are princes in this
There are.
story.
Yeah.
And we are sold out. People are having fun. The room is full. People are standing, and we have awesome speaker lineup from all over the world. So something interesting is happening here, and it feels like it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of DevOps, not just the beginning of Yalla DevOps. Yalla DevOps is just a vehicle for the community, but DevOps is the tsunami that approach the beach.
Good. While I have you, let me ask a little bit about JFrog. So what's new on the JFrog front?
Wow, so many great stuff are happening in JFrog. We are 3 months after Swamp Up, our user conference, when we announced the JFrog pipeline, the CI/CD, the result of the acquisition of Shippable. It is now being embedded into our platform. GA is coming up on October. We have crazy, insane news for KubeCon in San Diego in November that we are going to announce there.
We will be there live.
And we are going to announce something that will change the industry and the way open source adoption or open source tools adoption is handling today. We are part of a great movement of standard makers of what it means to have an end-to-end tool, but still respect the best of breed. New employees at JFrog. We have in Israel a crazy campaign of hiring. So
I've seen them all over.
It's
the
everywhere.
banners, the billboards, the electronic
imagine
signage.
there's no version. We want people that are not looking for a job to join JFrog, not the one that are obviously looking. We want the people that are curious about what it means to change the world. And DevOps is just a station. The real destination is what we change for everyone, the way software is being consumed. And Liquid Software is a vision, and we just took another leap forward with everything we released. And the GA is coming on October 27. We have awesome companies like Cisco and Fidelity and Capital One joined us in this beta program. The unified experience coming from JFrog includes DevSecOps and DevOps and package management and CI/CD, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's big stuff, big stuff. Well, Shlomi, once again, the JFrog frog magic has struck, and we're at a great show here in Herzliya. I couldn't be happier with you having to kick us off, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is a new thing that you want to follow, and I bet this will be the next big thing. DevPackOps. DevPackOps. Everybody is now doing package management. GitHub package management.
DAK.
Yes.
DevPackOps. We'll do something.
Remember
with
that.
DevPackOps.com. Well, look, I'm only kidding. Hey, I apologize that we're off to a late start, and we will have Hebrew coverage. Unfortunately, my Hebrew is not good enough to do it, but Baruch will be here shortly, and we'll be kicking off our Hebrew language coverage for our local folks in Israel. Remember, it's digitalanarchist.live. You can check it out there, and we'll be back soon. Shlomi, thank you.
Yalla, yalla.
Yalla, yalla.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, it's that time of the show now. We're on Tuesday. Every Tuesday's John Willis Day, Bachagaloop Day. We're turning things over to John right now. John, as I mentioned, has two great interviews today. One with our friend Damon Edwards of Rundeck, and one with Andrew Clay Schaefer, John's co-worker at Red Hat and DevOps pioneer. So over to John Willis.
Hey everybody, it's John Willis. This is TechStrong TV on Tuesday mornings, and as I promised last week, I'm gonna each week sort of interview a friend of mine who's got a startup that not only is a friend, but I think the startup's doing really well, and everybody should know who knows me. This is Damon Edwards, my partner in crime, going all the way back to like the original sort of DevOps discussions. Hey, and Damon, like Rundeck must be doing really well, because last time I visited, you had sort of small apartment in San Francisco, and it looks like you got some nice house in the Presidio.
Yeah, this is my new front yard. It's the Golden Gate Bridge.
Things are
I might buy that next.
So Rundeck, like catch everybody up on what's going on here.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, this is my actual background. Yes, I'm in my garage. These are trying times to live in a place like San Francisco and get away from your kids. So yeah, John, thanks for having me. Yeah, Rundeck's doing great. I mean, a lot of folks might have known Rundeck over the years. It's been an open source project since 2010, and was kicking around as that. And in 2016, people, all these kind of blue chip name companies were calling us saying, "Hey, we're using Rundeck all over the place. Can you help us?" And we're like, "Gee, there's something really here." So we made a commercial company, and really, it's kind of taken off from there. For those that don't know, Rundeck is runbook automation, right? So the idea there is you've got all these scripts and tools and interfaces, right? So everything from your automation, you've probably got a little bit of everything, right? Scripts and Ansible over there, and PowerShell over there, and Bash over there, and maybe some legacy tools as well, and new cloud native APIs. You got all these monitoring tools, these ticket tools, but the problem is to operate your services, you need that subject matter expert to understand how to orchestrate their own commands across all those tools, right? They need to know how to, what things to do in what order, what arguments to give, what boxes to check, what not to do, kind of how to do all these procedures. And a lot of that lives in people's heads, right? So the point of Rundeck is not to replace any of those tools. It's to give you a place where you put all of that knowledge, right? So and the point of it is you're now creating workflows that know how to span all those tools. You can create the guardrails around it, like error handling, notifications, default option handling, drop downs, all around the idea of how do I now expand the number of people in my organization who can do those tasks that previously only my experts could perform, right? So it's great for incident management, right? It's we're up against the wall, stuff's flying fast. I don't want to have to escalate, to 3 levels, get somebody who can help me. How do we take those expert things and put them into the hands of whoever's responding, right? Whether it be restarts or clearing a cache or changing a configuration. It's also great for business continuity purposes, right? So in this whole kind of new world we're living in, your data's fine, your infrastructure is fine, your buildings are fine, but it's your people now, right? Like they're the people who deal with the disruption in the world, the people who run the operations, they're now disrupted themselves, right? So what do you do, right? What do you do if they aren't available? Maybe it's temporary, they've got some childcare problem. I'm thinking about that in my head because I've got that coming up quickly here. Or they're sick, or a family member's sick, or we've had to have a reduction in our workforce. All that knowledge is just flying around, and if we can encapsulate it in the runbook automation, that allows other people in the organization to go ahead and take action, right? So way more efficient, a lot less waiting, a lot less interruptions. On the escalation front, shorter incidents, fewer escalations. It's really helping the operators operate better and spread that operational load around. How was that for a pitch? Is that good?
Yeah, really. Hey, good. You've done this before, huh? A couple of times. So in all transparency, I am an advisor to
Yep, very helpful. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and so obviously I would be, because me and Damon have been like best friends for quite a while. But again, I believe it's great. It really is great technology. I don't, friend or no friend, I can't waste my time on things that like aren't gonna give me value. The thing I think I've always liked about Rundeck, right, is sort of the governance aspects of it, the auditability. Like, I mean, the thing is, there's always a time when a company, I don't care how strict you think you are, companies always run some break glass procedures, right? Like, I have to get an internet server. We don't have a procedure for it. I have to do it. I mean, a lot of the breaches that we've seen over the last few years have been sort of break glass scenarios. Somebody had to put up a web service really quick. In fact, I'm sure we're going to find a gazillion of these in COVID-19 times. But like you take something like the Capital One breach, right? Like there was some form of a story of a break glass where people had to go out and create a web service that needed its own WAF, because they couldn't wait. And then a bunch of almost, in Sidney Decker terminology, it was an Air France 447 of all the possible things that could have went wrong. Now, Rundeck isn't going to fix that, but at least there would have been an audit trail of all the things that happened and could have caught, one of the things they did is they went out and grabbed, sort of an open source WAF that, in this sort of break glass. Go ahead, all right, here you go. We'll give you the authority to sort of break process. Go do it. They grabbed the WAF. They went ahead and took the defaults. They left sort of bypass. I don't want too far on, but they left some configuration options that make them incredibly vulnerable. And to me, I always think about that idea, like whether I got to give you break glass to get on to actually get on a server to do something, which Rundeck does really well. I could at least create a minimal set of scaffolding, and more important than anything is at least have an audit trail of the whole process.
Yeah, and the audit trail. Now, I'll address the audit trail one first, and I want to address the break glass issue. The audit trail is interesting because we've had a lot of Sean Norris from Standard Charter is famous for, he spoke at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, our favorite conference, right? A couple times about this and about how Rundeck became this surprise hero for him. That in the past, they had this huge overhead of you had to do kind of screen recording, and you had to have this special process to gain access to anything, right? And the reason why is because the whole bank, 165 years old, whatever it is, it's a global bank, 80 or 90,000 employees in like 60 different countries, meaning 60 different regulatory regimes. So the whole place was built for compliance, right? And what they use Rundeck for is say, hey, now we have these standard procedures, and that we'll have the experts build those procedures, and now we're actually reducing friction while improving our compliance posture, right? Because behind the scenes, we know from Rundeck, hey, here's where it came from, here's who approved it. There's an audit trail for the procedure itself. We know who ran it, where they ran it. The people are building in the flexibility into Rundeck because you can target, different nodes, or you can change different options. So they're actually giving people more power to do things themselves. Right? They're kind of setting people free to not have this huge compliance overhead. But from the compliance folks' perspective, they're actually raising their compliance posture because they've got that audit trail. A classic example we hear is, I've got these ServiceNow tickets, and there's this whole routing process and approval process, and we got this great kind of theater of compliance going on through this process. And then it comes down for somebody to do something, to actually touch something that could blow the world up, and they do something, and they come back to ServiceNow and they go, done, right? Or they copy the last line of the output that says, all okay. What happened, right? We have no idea. And it's not even just for the compliance perspective, but we see a lot of folks is using it for internal management perspective. Like teams like, what happened there, right? Well, something changed. Well, did it? Well, let's go look, right? Nope, we did the same procedure the same way we did it before. Let's cross that off the list. Let's go look for something else, right? So this idea of compliance is kind of like a free benefit, right? When you're going after speed and letting people work quicker and allowing more people to participate in operations activity than ever before. If you do it the right way through a runbook automation framework like Rundeck, you get the compliance part of it basically for free, right? That's one of it. And the break glass one's interesting because we had a different, it wasn't Sean Norris, it was different financial services SVP level person said it. What hit him one day was they didn't need the break glass job anymore. So before ticket, so they had this special ticket type in whatever I think it was Remedy or ServiceNow, and that special ticket type throws off a bunch of alarms, but then sends you this secret token to be able to log into to production, right? And they use it all the time, right? A bunch of people knew about it, made the production work visible, but it was a problem because they had all these issues. Well, when they started using Rundeck jobs instead, they could do almost all the things they would need to do in that break glass scenario and didn't need the break glass anymore, right? Because they're like, oh, I can just give those developers access to production because they're doing restarts, diagnostics, fetching logs, changing scale on things. They're doing exploratory things and, remediation activity, and they're doing it in production, but they don't have direct access, right? They're seeing all the log output and everything, but they're not logging into those machines.
I think this is the best thing about sort of Rundeck because
free reign. So therefore, they don't need it.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I was just saying, I mean, at the end, just to sum up, I mean, the thing I like the best about Rundeck is that, I talk about in some of my security things that, you can be right, 364 days and 23 hours a year. But, 24 hours and, or 23 hours and,
right.
59 minutes.
Yep.
And that 1 minute, could just cause your Equifax or your Marriott breach. And it's funny how, these companies that are incredibly good, again, not over-rotate on the Capital One scenario, but, they're sort of probably best of class. They created cloud custodian. They do all these things. But they got hit by one of those, 364 at 23 hours and 59-minute problems.
Yeah.
And the problem is that you're right. People give these break glass tickets out. Oh, I was at the Federal Reserve. I mean, you had to write up just a reasonable explanation of why you needed root access on a Federal Reserve server.
Yeah.
It translates
global economy.
Billions of dollars in minutes. There's seconds. A downtime of a second could lose $1 billion, right? And you were just given root access. So okay, wow, okay, I make 1 million RM-RF, right? And the beauty of sort of Rundeck is that it gives you specific access for the thing that you're only allowed to do, and it has an audit trail. Anyway, we're up at the 10 minutes, and I promised I would keep this. Anyway, good stuff, and maybe I'll get you back, and we're gonna get cloud. The Cloud Cafe, I mean DevOps Cafe.
I appreciate it, buddy. I mean, that was our. I miss those days. We've been on hiatus, but like Game of Thrones or Sopranos, we make you wait for the next season. But yeah, I'm excited. Alan's going to give us a new home on the Digital Anarchist, DevOps.com for that, and look forward to do more of this. I appreciate the opportunity, buddy.
As I say, hug your family and stay safe, my friend.
I will. You too. Thanks.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hey, this is John Willis. We're on TechStrong TV today, part of Digital Anarchist, and I've got my good, close friend for many years here, and actually, I would say he's my boss, but I don't think he'd like me saying that. He's my peer in some way, but Andrew Schaefer. Go ahead, Andrew.
We're on TV?
Yes, we're on TechStrong TV.
Wow.
Took this long to get on TV.
I finally made it.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, thanks for me.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
So, a bunch of stuff, right? We've been yakking about this stuff for many years, and now we actually work together. But so we had the opportunity, at KubeCon. I think it was Jane Grohl, me, and you, and we had just introduced a week earlier me, you, Kevin Bear, and Jay Bloom joining Red Hat as something called a Global Transformation Office, sorry, GTO. And I think back then we were sort of aspirational on what we want to do. And I thought maybe now's a good time is what is this GTO as a recap, and where is it? Sort of, we're almost at 6 months now since we started.
Seems like 10 years ago. KubeCon.
Yeah, given
March seemed like 10 years by itself.
No kidding. Yeah, no kidding. This has been a crazy year. We can talk about that a little bit, but so GTO.
I think it's hard not to talk about it. So you know, there's what we are working on and what we have worked on, and then there's the fact that the whole world is kind of on pause, or in some sense, in some cases, being reconfigured. And you know, that definitely has a lead into a bunch of transformation stories, because I think there's a bunch of organizations that were artificially creating reasons why they could or couldn't do certain things with respect to technology, that now in the matter of weeks, in some cases days, reversed all of it to accommodate the fact that they couldn't bring people to their offices. And it's both changing how they do work, and then it's also forcing a lot of these organizations to confront the types of digital experiences they're creating for their own customers. So there's definitely some interesting things that are happening, and you know, not all of them are fun, and certainly I don't know how everyone else is dealing with the fact that, you know, if you've got kids, then they're all home, like trying to go to school all day or not trying to go to school or whatever. It was like definitely taking a toll over at my house.
So you know, we talk about transformation, right? And you know, I was going to ask you, you know, why is it so hard why is transformation so hard in the enterprise? But you're right. I don't think you're right now. We can sit here and keep a straight face and not talk about transformation in light of where we are right now in sort of middle of April and the uncertainty, and then what's transformation. So one argument you could say is it should be the same, right? The discussion of how you do transformation should be the same. One argument you say we're in this sort of weird, but I think I struggle with this, right? Like should it be the same? There are people that are actually succeeding. You know, there's people I've talked to said this is not a crisis for us. Because 3 years ago, we made these kind of investments in how we do sort of our behaviors, our technologies. So is there a difference?
So I think, you know, both of us have a pretty privileged view and access to a bunch of people in different places. And I think you have people that made certain investments in different kinds of work, and it'd probably be worth talking a little bit about, you know, business continuity. And then you also have cases where, to be honest, it doesn't actually matter how good your digital transformation was, because the prevailing circumstances for the nature of your business means that you're at 30% revenue, 10% revenue, 50% revenue. Not very many businesses can all of a sudden be in a place where, you know, whatever you want to say about planning or resilience, you go to 50% revenue or less, you're going to have a bad time. So I don't think, I personally think you can look at these scenarios, and we've had some conversations with people where, you know, if you're in travel or hospitality right now, that's a very different equation you're trying to solve. If you are in healthcare, you know, you might be trying to put new capabilities together at a speed that you never would have considered a few weeks ago. And then you know, there's a lot of stuff in the middle, and then you have, you know, banks are in the same place. They're trying to respond to the legislation to do the small business loans. So the people who made, you know, certain capabilities or grease the skids, if you will, for certain capabilities are deploying them, and then others maybe aren't. But like I don't think you can consider this a normal situation in the way that anyone would have saw the game being played.
No, I agree. Definitely not. There's obviously not normal. And you know, as you know, I've been sort of interviewing. I've interviewed probably 10 companies now, large airlines, large, you know, hotel chains, payment systems, entertainment, cable. so across the board. And it's interesting. I think that there was somebody that had it categorized like 3 categories of like people who are scaling right now, people who are retraction, and people are maintaining, or companies that are maintaining. But I still sort of, it bugs me. So I think that even the retraction, like the airlines, I talked to one airline losing $30 million a day in refund systems. And like that happened like on a Friday, everything was rosy. They finished their leadership. The year was going to be great. And even within sort of at that time, they knew sort of COVID was around, but they were still like their numbers and flights was off the chart. And then by Tuesday, the next day, they're in this sort of wasteland of 30 million. But there's sort of a, like, a leveler for like a builder or a carpenter. I still think there's sort of this theme of how you're going to come out of this. What are you going to look like? And I think that I still think that transformation story doesn't change.
Yeah, I think there's elements of it that are timeless principles, right? And that's what we're trying to unlock in our capabilities and in our customers. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I mean, pick a metaphor. If the tornado hit your house, like what you have to do to live again is different than if you were just in the neighborhood the tornado went through, right? And so there are organizations right now that I believe, regardless of their performance, technical excellence, what have you, in this kind of digital narrative that we find ourselves part of, I don't think there's any level of performance that necessarily keeps more people on the airplanes or in the hotels right now, right? So it's like, if you have a fundamental business or value proposition that is essentially eliminated by the circumstances, yeah, you could do these things, you could have these capabilities, competencies, technical excellence, all this, but like that does not overcome the reality that you're facing.
But isn't that how you look at it then too, as an organization? Like, in other words, there are companies right now that are going on hiring freezes. Again, yeah, there's definitely devastation, right? Like if you've gone, I think that this is public, but Delta is losing $60 million a day. They've gone from like 600,000 flights a day to like I think it's like 6,000 or something, like, oh no, 600,000 to 40.
I thought it was 40.
Yeah, 40,000, right? But this is, I think, like you talk to airlines, they said, like, we've seen this before, not as compact, but we've had pilot strikes, we had 9/11. And so the question is, how do you come out of this? And I don't think that any of the really big customers, I mean, they're all sort of reasonably optimistic about, like, what is this going to look like, hopefully in 3 or 4 months, 6 months, worst case a year from now. And then I think then that sort of that dial tone of what you do does make a difference, and how you react now. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. I guess, to drag more metaphors in, going back to like chess or strategy, the situation that you have is yours, and you have the opportunity to make moves and make the best of it. But you could set up the chessboard in such a way that you have a losing position, and if you're playing someone who knows how to play chess, you're going to have a really hard time getting out of it. And so finding that best move when there's not good moves is a very different thing. So there's the principles that I think are the same about situational awareness and responsiveness and resilience to those situations. But I just want to be sensitive to the reality that not all games are winnable, right? And so it's like, what is the reconfiguration of these economies going to mean? And it's not like, all the examples that we kind of gave a minute ago, those were acute and focused. And right now we have something that's global and widespread. And so there's just a lot more to the game than, oh, well, we're just gonna make an investment in this IT project and like create business value. It's like, well, okay.
So then, to be pragmatic, again, not to be insensitive, because like this is more than just money. It's more than just your career. This is about sort of people's lives, and so I don't want to sound insensitive, to focus on the sort of people that have moves, right? To your chess metaphor, and I love your chess metaphors, by the way, although I don't think I'll ever play you in chess. That would be a scary thing to do.
I'm playing poorly right now, by the way.
Oh yeah, your poorly would like destroy me.
Well, I think I use it as a barometer of my kind of like baseline stress level, and
that's funny. That's pretty interesting. So the like a lot of what you're about is okay. Like, how do you sort of help the people that do have the possible moves? And then I guess then it goes back to my question, like some of your thoughts about why it's so hard for enterprises to do transformation. I know you've been sort of covering some really new cool ideas around this, or ideas that you've had for a while. I mean, your experience is sort of vast, right? We all have great experiences, but I think your background of working at Pivotal and seeing the landscape from there, and now coming over to Red Hat, and I think you have this like industry unique position to take a sort of.
I would say that I had a very privileged perspective since Puppet, and going into that, I had background working in venture funded startups and a ton of kind of like firsthand exposure to the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto. And so it's like I spent a ton of time with Alistair Coburn, and I worked in startups, and we were doing whatever. So I was like this Agile programmer, and then I started getting into the infrastructure stuff, and what eventually became a DevOps centered focus for the last 10 years. But around 2005-ish, started getting into the Puppet thing, and then by 2008 or 9, like it was in full swing. And so I would say going back even to then, or it started there, having a very privileged perspective to watch a bunch of infrastructure projects and software projects over that span.
No doubt, but the Pivotal thing, right? Like like I know your background, and like, but like the Pivotal thing sort of put you, like you were doing big stuff there, right?
I think that there's, and this company doesn't exist right now, at least not as a company. There was a level of access to the industries, the C-level initiatives to do this kind of transformation work that was funded with, and backed by this coalition of companies that had access and was doing all these infrastructure and software projects. So, again, we got to see a lot of different attempts to do things, a lot of different patterns of what sort of worked or didn't work, and that was definitely a meaningful chapter in my career, and put us in a position to do some of the stuff we're trying to do now. So definitely left. I would say I learned a bunch of lessons about what to do and what not to do in that span.
Okay, so
so anyway, to go back to the question, actually, but
yeah.
I don't want to dwell on any other company, but you basically have a pattern that I'll draw back to the earliest days of my own work, where the difference between organizations who can succeed with these kind of new tools and new information is a function of those organizations' ability to change their behavior. So, you give a training, you give them a tool, you say, here's how you're going to do this thing, whether it's talking about some software development thing, or you're talking about, configuring servers with a tool, or any of the new stuff, right? So you give someone a tool, you give them a lesson, and then can they take advantage of that tool? And we all experience this in our own kind of individual lives, trying to learn new skills, play musical instruments, play sports, whatever. When you get to organizations, there's a resistance in a lot of cases, because the human individuals involved tend to attach their identity to their tasks. And so now when you're telling someone to do this thing in a new way, then there's some personalities or people, and there's a bunch of reasons why the psychology works this way, but they kind of feel like you're erasing their identity, and so then they'll like resist that. And like we saw this over and over, and we talked about this in DevOps days for 10 years. And then when you get to, and this is how it comes back into some of the stuff we're talking about now, when you get to see all these patterns, I would say that there's sort of this natural capacity to learn. So there's organizational learning capacity, and you have, people study this, and I used to give some talks about this. I haven't spent a lot of time on it lately, but we're trying to drag some of it back into the work we're doing at Red Hat. But this like dimensions of organizational learning and being able to say, in this organization, we enable ourselves to learn. We focus on how we work, not just the fact that we work. We empower people regardless of their rank to participate. And you see a lot of that kind of as a natural part of the Red Hat culture. Like, it's a very open culture. The open is something that is a badge of honor in a lot of the conversations you're going to have inside Red Hat. So then you look at this notion of the success of that change of behavior. You have a natural propensity to change, or you don't, right? So it's like organizations that can learn, you give them the tool, you give them the training, you turn around, they'll tell you it's the best thing that ever happened to them. And this type of thing happened to me more than once doing, DevOps consulting projects with whatever tool, and you give what you think is the same exact information, the same exact tool to another group, and they'll fall all over themselves, like not getting it to where you thought you'd explained it to them, and then you have, I mean, this is all ancient history now, but it's like people will call you and they'll be like, yeah, Puppet took down all of our infrastructure. It's like, well, what did you do? It's like, oh, well, we committed this thing that was like basically a policy to take down all of infrastructure into the Puppet master. It's like, so it like did exactly what he told it to do.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of work through the process and get people to the level. So long-winded end of this story is the things that I've seen be the two cases that I would consider the most successful transformation. Not that it's two cases, it's two categories. And one is that you get a charismatic leader who has the social capital and the vision and the risk taking or whatever, and just sort of by leadership alone expends that social capital in such a way that the coalition of the willing overcomes the resistance to stay the same, and you see like incredible capabilities get created in some of these organizations that or like alternatively, this resistance is one of the reasons why people like to do these little innovation centers or have the skunkworks projects that aren't under the normal rules. And then the other thing that I've seen be successful in catalyzing transformation in organizations of this kind of shape and size is something that's an existential crisis to the business. If the business leadership can see, with their understanding of their market, that if they don't change certain things, and sometimes that's external pressure with the buyers or new entrants into the market or something, then they're not gonna exist. Then they'll go do something and it'll become a new thing. And there's lots of examples of that all through every industry, right? So it's like, what did Nintendo start its life as? Like, Nintendo is a game company. That's what we know it as. That's not what it started as. Go look it up.
All right, I'll do that.
Anyway, that was a long ramble.
No, it's good. It was good. I mean, I think one of the all-time greatest quotes in the sort of DevOps discussion is you're either building a learning organization or you're losing to one who isn't.
Losing to someone who is.
Yeah. Sorry. It's a long day, right? A lot of calls. I think, I think, to be honest with you, to sort of speak for Gene Kim, I think it's his favorite quote of all time, but he said that to me, but so
we should do a roundtable with Gene.
We will actually. That'd be fun. That'd be fun. I think we're doing a virtual DOS. That would be really. Think about who else you'd want it. I've done a couple of those with Gene where I got a couple of years ago. I got Gene to invite in a roundtable Dr. Cook, Stephen Spear, and Sidney Decker, and it was just insane, So you'd be good. Just think of who else you'd want that would actually cause some contrast, and I'll see if I can't make it happen, because that was a lot of fun.
Are we trying to maximize the
Well,
contrast?
it's the debate, like that sort of tension that debate we had. There was a lot of tension between the lean and the safety people to begin with. And at some point, it cracked open, and it became brilliant. So yeah, I'll work on that. But so
before all the conflict, or the crisis that we're in, there's this general trend that I would say captures a lot of the work that I've been trying to do and you've been trying to do, which is the tension between kind of this old way, ITIL service management style of doing this work towards the new way, whatever you want to call it, DevOps, SRE, cloud native, whatever the buzzword is. And that's a set of combination of these technologies and these practices and these processes, and then overriding all of it, at least I feel, and this is connection to Agile and some of these other movements as well, is that there's this peculiarity of knowledge work where you kind of have to think about it more as a system, or you get better results when you think about it as a system, and you enable each of these agents, the developers, operators, whatever, to have much more autonomy because you hired them because they are smart, right? You hired them. Hopefully, you have smart people working on your technology, or you're kind of already losing. And so then lots of these organizations that were born, pre-cloud, where computing was a auxiliary to some other business, then they inherited these processes from what's essentially the management theory that grew out of the Industrial Revolution and like factory work. And I feel like what we're, the people have articulated a few different ways, but I feel like part of what we're experiencing is in this shift to the true knowledge economy, the true digital economy, the necessity of enabling these new ways of working, these new kind of cultural modes to be dominant as a competitive advantage. And if you're trying to manage with the older styles, then it's a disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes back to all the things I've learned from you, even though I didn't know I learned them from you. Like, Ben Rockwood had turned me on to Dr. Deming, right? And turns out Ben Rockwood learned about Deming based on you pointing out Deming's 14 points, right? But
I quote Deming almost every talk ever.
Yeah, so. Really early, and then like, oh, it was Andrew. Like, geez, but it's a Deming-Taylor thing, right? Frederick Winslow Taylor, right? Like, it's sort of command and control. And
there's a lot of great thinkers, right? Like I don't feel like we're introducing novel thoughts in some ways. We're trying to manifest the things that Deming was talking about. Akoff. There's a bunch of these other thinkers, lines of thinkers that had success or failure creating solutions in their time and place, right? And like Deming does a lot of things I love, but then some of the stuff he does is still too rooted in manufacturing to translate straight across to knowledge work.
Yeah, I mean, that's another discussion, because I do think there's, I mean, when you look at sort of the pure principles, it's variety, it's variation, it's velocity, right? Like the Toyota 4VL, but I think it does. I think you can do a lot of sort of mapping, or smart mapping between manufacturing and knowledge work. I know that's a great debate in our industry.
I love having that debate, and I do think you're right on certain level. But then when you start to talk about the variation, when you're talking about minimizing variation in an industrial process, you're creating the same thing over and over. And when you go into the work required to deliver software, then each task is already by definition variation. And so a lot of the kind of whatever total quality management or some of the things that a little bit of it was founded on doesn't hold quite as well.
But so So I'm going to say, so I've thought a lot about this, right? Because I think there's there's a line of demarcation, right? Which is from commit to deploy, then you can do almost all Deming. You can do statistical process control, you can look at variance, and you can sort of measure that. From sort of the left-hand side of that, ideation, I think you're right. I think then a lot of those ideas don't map very well. So I've gotten into this fight with David J. Anderson once, right? Where my argument is you're right on the left-hand side, ideation. You're wrong on the right-hand side.
I mean, this isn't the debate I really want to have right now, but
Yeah, all right,
I
fair
kind of
enough.
feel like it breaks down even a little bit in the middle. So it's like, yeah, you can start to talk about some of that and have metrics around it, and the accelerate metrics are great. But then when you really look at it, each one of those commits is a totally different task each time, right? So I mean, I get the point, and I believe
right.
in metrics and like having metrics around it.
Yeah.
But it's just not a perfect metaphor. So, but here's the thing, and this dovetails into some of the work
All right.
that you've been doing lately that I think is interesting. And I've been doing some of it, but not quite as focused as you on the business continuity and like the thoughts around this. And one of the things that's interesting, and you can riff off this for a minute, but basically, lots of business continuity is run as an afterthought, kind of as a separate silo from the types of things that we've been talking about in the DevOps community. And I think that there's a opportunity to recognize some of that in a first class way coming out of some of the things that we're seeing in the crisis, and going back to what you're saying about sort of situational awareness and trying to make the most of it. So there's a ton of interesting conversation to have around business continuity right now.
Yeah, no, it's I'm trying to write this blog article, but it's becoming so long. One great example of like one company that basically had two companies had do an offshore development, offshore development centers right in India, and one company basically because it was a banking software, and part of their sort of risk acceptance was that the only way that people in sort of a foreign country like that could work on sort of core banking software was that they had these sort of secure sites with metal detectors. You can't bring your phone in, no printers, 24/7 cameras, and that was part of their risk acceptance that was okay for and people were still vetted, but mostly banks don't want sort of, especially in areas where they don't do any business. And then that bank apparently, like one day, like, I don't know, late March, they were told that nobody could come to the center because they all had this sort of isolation, shelter in place, and they had no risk acceptance policy. So literally for 2.5 weeks, the global risk team, operations, RMs had to come up with legal during the crisis, losing 20% of development force. Another company I talked to, now they're not a bank, they don't have as strict requirements, battled when he went over to build his a payment system company. He went over to build his offshore development stuff. The first thing he said is, I want all these people to work from home. Like, they're wasting too much time driving in. And even all the sort of middle managers in India are like, we don't do that here. He's like, what do you mean? I'm building this. We're doing that here. And then he spent another 6 months fighting with HR with his company just to pay all the developers for high-speed internet and just the things they needed to be sort of to work from home. And here's the kicker. On one of the roundups, like 2 weeks ago, a week and a half, CEO's going around to all the teams of this payment system company, and he's asking everybody their risks, and he rattles off his risks, and he doesn't mention anything about India, and everybody else has had a risk in India. And the CEO's like, oh, nothing going on in India? He's like, no, you remember that time we battled with HR to give everybody the extra like $200 or $300 to set up their high-speed internet, give them the high-speed modems and the proper working environment, and you finally agreed to it? That's why we don't have any problems in India. So like, there's all these sort of like nothing was like written in their business continuity plans for these kind of crazy. And I've got story after story after story about these unintended consequences or these fault lines that existed. And one argument you could make is, and it's a reasonable argument, is, well, how could you expect to map out all the uncertainty of a scenario that like we're having right now? But at the same time, the industry spends 600 to 800 million a year on software. Every company has at least one floor of people that are sort of part of the business continuity board. And I haven't spoken to one Fortune 500 company out of the 10 or 12 that I talked to that even has mentioned, or the word BCM or BCP has not even come up in any of their sort of ventures over the last month.
Related to the kind of backup and restore metaphor, where it's like, you know,
Well,
like people build these business continuity plans with these certain assumptions, but they never really tested.
Yeah.
And so then, like, when you get a thing that's outside of that, or sometimes even when you get something that you thought you accounted for, the fact that you didn't test your continuity in any way comes back to be a problem. And a lot of the principles of what we're just talking about, building resilient infrastructure, building resilient teams, like you don't have to worry about disaster recovery if you build systems that can withstand some continuous partial failure, right? So really it's about engineering not just the systems for the computation, but the systems for all the workflows to be able to handle some of that too.
Well, like there's a bank that I talked to, right? Like, so 2 years ago, they invested in what they call locality and simplicity, resilience, and psychological safety, right? So that's been their 3 pillars. Locality and simplicity is really about sort of allowing teams to decouple their workloads from other teams, automated pipelines, all that stuff being push button, right? So the whole DevOps from an automation standpoint. Resilience is they've been running chaos engineering, circuit breaker patterns in production bank applications for over 1.5 years, 2 years, like literally, doing microsegmentation, like literally taking advantage of some of the early service mesh stuff. And we don't have to get too far into that, but they were certainly running circuit breaker patterns. They're running distributed tracing, and they're actually running chaos engineering. And then the third thing is they gave a copy of this one service delivery group, 700 people. They gave a copy of Just Culture by Sidney Decker and had everybody read it, right? And so now when you're out in the field and you have to make decisions really fast, you need psychological safety. You need, I think what does Jabe call it? Adaptive skills liquidity, right? The adaptive capacity, all those things. And banks were literally forced with the CARE Act to deliver the requirements dropped on a Monday, and the applications were supposed to be up on a Friday. No APIs, all form-based. And banks literally had to get that up in 3 days. This one bank, because they made that investment, they actually were able to get the SBA loan portion of the CARE Act up and running in 3 days, right? I think that's the sort of these investments that people have made. It's particularly, you talk about this all the time, but some people call it psychological safety, a sort of open mindset. But somebody's out there in the field. There's no chain of command. There's no clear chain of command. Even in a distributed, sort of a distributed trust model, or you called it earlier, sort of in a dimensional learning organization, where people have the ability to sort of make decisions. So I'll just say it's more of a Deming model than a Taylor model. But the point is, even in those models, there still are these broken continuity lines of, when you're in an office, everybody can go to a meeting room. There's a whiteboard in a meeting room. Now you can get a Zoom, but or you could run down to a group of people that are like in this area with 10 people around one cube. You can't sort of do that now. And so now more than ever, people need to feel the freedom of making a decision on the spot without fear of retribution, right? And so all those things sort of, like I'm finding is the companies that have had that at least have been reasonably successful in making that part of their sort of forward-moving model are having way more success than people who are. It's like the army metaphor, right? The Russian army versus the sort of American army. If you're in a foxhole, you can't go back and like find the chain of command to find out what to do. So,
no, I think this is the new style, right? This is the new capability, and related to this, one of the things I spent a little bit of time thinking about today was conversations that were specifically focused on kind of like national security and organizations that would be concerned about even military stuff. And it put into my head a book that I read that I consider one of the quote unquote most DevOps books ever written, which is the Team of Teams book from General McChrystal, talking about the joint task force that was put together kind of in response to these issues in the Middle East, and how they had this proud tradition, as military people with all these different things with hierarchies and command and control, and each one of these different units and capabilities had that super strict command and control capability. But then in the modern urban setting, when you're not trying to mobilize troops against some other standing army, but you're actually trying to deal with insurgents who are embedded in the population, highly networked, and making decisions point to point with their own capabilities. If you're depending on every decision to go back into the kind of centralized command center, then you're just too slow, and you can't coordinate those capabilities to the level that gives you any like really any return on the fact that you're there. And in some cases you're actually losing ground because you're there. So that transformation that those military, very traditional, very strong command and control organizations had is like a perfect transformation story for like everything we're talking about. And they got the same conclusion that we just said. It's like we gotta make cross-functional teams to one, share more context, and to two, drive away the kind of competitive animosity that we have. Like we want to have our pride and our traditions, but also the mission, the larger mission, is more important. So it's like create constancy of purpose, drive these cross functional teams, and then they use the same sort of, they have slightly different language, but it's basically like psychological safety. You have to be able to have a decentralized decision-making matrix. You're trying to provide as much information, as much context, and a constant realignment to the overall mission. But if you're waiting for the information to come back to the decision makers in a central command and control mechanism, you're just too slow. You're simply too slow. There's no way.
Yeah, and you have to have that sort of, again, that the freedom to know that I see something wrong. Like one of the things one of the banks told me is like, what we don't want now is an outage. Out of all the things that are going on, we like really don't want an outage right now, right? You get 3 days to put an application up, right? And so somebody in the field is like, I think this is wrong, right? I'm going to stop this. They need to have that sort of feeling of power that they can say, I'm going to stop this, and I have a good argument. And then the organization has to be like, you have to trust your people. One of my baptisms.
It's kind of like the andon cord, right? It's like,
yeah, totally. It is the andon cord, right? Like the sort of Toyota, it was the question when you stopped the line, if you eventually did stop the line at Toyota, the manager would come up to you and thank you before you even knew what happened. They wouldn't be like, why did you stop the line? What was your justification? They'd go, I want to thank you. This is in Mike Roth's Toyota Kata book. They would thank you and say, because you gave us a learning opportunity. No matter what reason you stopped the line, it's probably somebody else's reason as well. And let's iterate on that. Yeah, no, I think all that sort of, comes together. And again, I think I promised Alan we'd probably keep this under an hour, but there's so much more. We could go on for like 4 hours here, but I think I've always said this, I think there's the two greatest presentations ever given in DevOps, and for different reasons, was Ben Rockwood's, DevOps transformation, like 2011. And then there is no talent shortage, right? Which was really, I think to me, it draws the blueprint of almost everything we've just talked about for the last 25 minutes. That sort of original discussion about like your real power is sort of how you get your people to sort of think a certain way, act a certain way, right? No?
I was in a very kind of privileged position, like I said, and I got fascinated with this problem of transformation. I wasn't calling it transformation at the time, but it's basically like, can you take advantage of the circumstances? Can you take advantage of the tools and the new ways of working? And I was reflecting on all the kind of work I'd done for the last few years, and then I stumbled into this academic research on organizational learning. And I do love that talk, but I also feel like I didn't give it as well as I could have, or like it confused some people with the Nash equilibrium stuff. And then,
yeah. That was brilliant too, right? It took me almost a year and a half to figure out.
Yeah, but some of it's just me being a gratuitous nerd and
no,
communicating with
honestly,
plain language.
not just because I'm interviewed, not because I work with you, but I mean, once I figured out that I've used it many times in my presentation. That anyway, that will really confuse people at this point. At the 52nd minute of our presentation or our podcast, that would be a bad thing to sort of get a teaser.
But I believe it when I first read it, and I believe it now, that the advantage, the only sustainable advantage, is learning.
Yes.
And I think that's true for individuals and organizations. And there's already like a body of research, and so there's the Watkins-Marsick 7-dimensional organizational learning stuff that's in that talk. I really also like some of the systems thinking, 5 elements, 5th element stuff from Senghi, and like there's already this body of interesting kind of research and thought around it. And it seems like for whatever reason, Deming's another example. It's like people get a little bit of notoriety and maybe some success, but then for some reason the autocrats come back and take over at some point. I haven't quite figured it out, but I do believe that organizational learning is the sustainable competitive advantage.
I totally agree. Well, that's probably a good way to wind up. We'll do some more of this because I do want to talk about some of the new cool stuff that
we didn't get to the 5 elements or some of this SRE. There's another thing I've been thinking about that's interesting, and it's to kind of copy the SRE metaphor and model, but it's like site security engineering. And when you start to think about some of these kind of like taking and tying to the automated DevSecOps stuff with the threat modeling and like the engineering, like it's not just policy, but like what can you enforce with the code, with the platforms from a security perspective. And so it's like crossing a stream of different capabilities.
No, you can get me going forever. I mean, I'm working on a couple of projects about policy as code, where it's sort of literally policy people are creating YAML files that are driving OPA into, Rego, turning into Rego, and like enforcement, dumping stuff in Grapheus. Like it's one of our good friends at a bank is just going crazy with this stuff right now. But we'll table that for another conversation. We got a great team. Our Jay Bloom guy. I mean, that guy he's insane how this stuff I get chills every time he writes something. So I'm so glad he's part of this team. So
I mean, we all have our different.
Yeah, we all have our superpowers, no doubt about it.
I mean, I got Jay for a reason. I love his brain and like how he thinks about things. Sometimes it's just a question of like translating it into
but he's
human language. But
Kevin's awesome too. So yeah, we got good stuff going here. We'll be trying to add more of this stuff like every Tuesday. Maybe I'll get Kevin and Jabe on, maybe the 3 of us. We probably don't want all 4 of us on one call, but I'll just try to keep like getting
every now and then.
There. All right, man. Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'll come back anytime you invite me.
Yeah, sounds good, man. All right.
Hey, everyone. Hey, so much thanks to John. He does every Tuesday, as I mentioned. Catch it here on TechStrong TV. Always great guests, great subject matters, and everything else. Now it's time for our news, though. Let me tell you what's headlines. If you've watched our show recently, what I try to do is just give you 1 or 2 articles from each of our sites for you to check out that I think are worth checking out. They're not meant to be exhaustive. They're not meant to, capture it all. We're doing 40, 50, 60 articles coming in on Security Boulevard every day. There's 3, 4, 5 on DevOps.com and a couple on Container Journal. I can't give you all of them on here. So check those out. Stay abreast. I mean, there's more news than what we see on these mainstream 24-hour news cycles. Anyway, on Security Boulevard, I did a conversation interview with Mitchell Ashley last week around Apple and Google getting together to help contact tracing for COVID-19. And the technology can really be helpful. But, there's real privacy concerns here. And there's a lot of privacy concerns around the whole COVID, what we're going to need here from a public health perspective, kind of trumping, no pun intended, privacy concerns. But the Apple-Google alliance really can, in the wrong hands, you could see the abuse there. So this is a good article that kind of explores that, and I recommend you check it out. The other one I wanted to mention on Security Boulevard was APTs, RATs, and code signing attacks. So again, the bad guys don't stop for sickness, pandemics, or anything else. There's a lot going on in that space, and it's a good update article. If you're a cyber person, even if you're not a cyber person, take a look at that one on Security Boulevard. Again, that's APTs, RATs, and code signing attacks. Over to Container Journal. We have a good article, kind of a little bit of a tutorial how-to on going beyond default Kubernetes configs for greater security. And it's not just Kubernetes. Whether you're setting up your wireless router or anything, just using the default configs are not really optimizing your security usually, and you need to go before. But this article delves into it from a Kubernetes point of view. Highly recommend it. Check that one out. And then we have a few other ones on Container Journal here. One is that Cloud Foundry has launched build packs for containers, and good to see some fresh news out of the Cloud Foundry folks. Second is my friend Bill Mond's company, Styra, the people behind OPA, Open Policy Agent, have updated their compliance platform for Kubernetes. There's a good article on that. And then the good folks at Stackflow, including my friend Michelle McLean, who hopefully I'm going to have on the show maybe next week for an interview. StackRox delivers compliance controls for NIST 853, I believe it is. Yes. And do check that out. The StackRox people, they really are going, they don't run security for Kubernetes and Cloud Native here. They're going deep. And really, more than some of the other companies I've seen, they really are hitting Kubernetes security and Cloud Native security at a very tactical level, really understanding the different layers of it, and highly recommend that. And then over to DevOps.com, I've got a really good article from my friend Bob Resselman. Bob is so deep. He's so much more than the Roll Bob cartoons or even the comic books that he's doing right now for us, the latest adventures of microservices and the decoupling. Bob's really passionate about automation and what it means for employment and stuff like that. And as part of the Accelerated Strategies Group analyst, he's had a chance to kind of spread his wings a little bit. He has a great article that we've got up here now called Metropolis Now, The Two Worlds of Employment in the Age of Automation. And if you're old enough to remember Ronald Reagan's City on the Hill, and of course Mario Cuomo's rebuttal to that, about two cities. This is in that vein where we have haves and have-nots, and how in the age of automation, there's going to be a reckoning around this. And I think this whole COVID thing and everything else is kind of hastening that. So check out Bob's article on that in DevOps.com. Also, we'll have Bob on maybe tomorrow or Wednesday, and we're going to dive into the adventures of microservices that he's been working on, as well as some other stuff. Finally, on DevOps.com, stay ahead of the 5G and DevOps race with continuous network monitoring. And, continuous network monitoring is a cornerstone of, good hygiene in DevOps, cyber, and everything else. So it makes total sense. Check out the article. Again, not meant to be exhaustive, but some good articles there that'll keep you up to date on what's happening and keep your chops up. Okay, that's it for the news. This is Alan Schimmel. Now it's that time of the day where we go over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene has an interview from just this past February at RSA with Eitan Wersel from HCL about AppScan. Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist at RSA San Francisco 2020.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops. which produces DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, and the Digital Anarchist media platform. And having lots of really great conversations at RSA 2020. Today's day 3. We are in the final hours, but we've been having so many great conversations, and I'm really excited about this next one with Eitan Borsel, who is with HCL, and I am so glad that you're here with me today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Great, great. So I know, let's talk about AppScan.
Okay.
You guys just had a new version come out, right?
We are having a new version coming out next month.
Oh, okay.
It's major, big version, version 10.
Oh.
It's the first version under HCL, so we've been waiting for it for a long time.
Okay.
In a way, you can look at it as a 6 years work on a version, coming down, boiled down now to a single version that will sign the new way for us.
Well, tell the audience a little bit about AppScan. They might not be,
Sure.
They might not know about the technology.
I'll be happy to. I'm in AppScan for a very long time now, since 2007. AppScan standard, it's how it started back in 2001. It was the first dynamic analysis product to do web application scanning.
Okay.
It paved the way. It was an Israeli startup company named Sanctum. Was later acquired in 2004. Sorry, it's been a long 3 days here, right?
Seems like, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Time is irrelevant here.
It was bought by a Canadian company named Watchfire, and then in 2007 was bought by IBM.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it started like that. Security tool for security experts. Very hands-on tool to find everything in the application, help customers and companies secure their application, and in turn secure our data, right? Because we are their customers usually.
Right.
And we grew since, added more and more technologies. Recently in July, we were purchased by HCL,
Okay.
as you mentioned. And we are now about to release a very exciting new version.
Well, I look forward to seeing it when it comes out. That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. So what's going to be new, or can you not give that away yet?
I'm happy to give that away.
Okay, all right, great.
So as I mentioned, AppScan originally was for the security experts, right? But the industry changed. I mean, DevOps, right? We can't prolong the testing activity now. Everyone wants to ship the release quickly. They won't wait for security to give them their approval.
Right.
So we focused a lot on that approach, right? That perspective, that market. We want to make sure that our tool actually caters the developers and DevOps engineers and the business in their need to release fast. But it was important for us, coming from the security side, not to let go of our DNA, right? We wanted to be a security product. We didn't want to be just something that makes you feel good. Hey, I'm running scans.
Right.
If you don't get the value. What we are doing now with this release, first of all, we are adding another technology to our technology stack. That's called IaaS, Interactive Application Security Testing. It's added to the Dust, Dynamic Application Security Testing, Static Application Security Testing, and the open source scanning that we are doing. So we will have the full suite of testing.
That's great.
And all of that integrate nicely into the pipeline. So with the build environments, with the IDEs, a lot of really exciting stuff.
All right, great. So DevOps is definitely a main part of your business these days, then, huh? So, what do you think? I mean, I've been hearing from so many different people at this year's show that DevSecOps it seems to be on everybody's lips and everybody's minds, and we heard it a little last year, but this year it just seems to have exploded. So, what is your take on it? Do you think that are we kind of just giving lip service to DevSecOps, or do you think companies are really kind of now understanding and recognizing the importance of having security earlier in the cycle?
I think they understand. I think that most companies that we talk to are in their journey to DevOps, right? They want to do DevOps, but when you think about the big companies out there, the big banks and financial institutions, insurance, they're not DevOps. They're in their journey. They understand security. They want to see how it fits. Being around in the expo floor, it's crazy amount of vendors talking DevSecOps. I agree with you. It was really encouraging to see all the application security vendors and solutions out there. But to your point, I felt that the industry was trying to play nice with DevOps and adding Sec in a way.
Yeah. I kind of get the idea that DevSecOps is the buzzword. You know, like over in DevOps land, value stream management, value stream mapping is kind of the buzzword of the moment. So I think here in security, I think we're hearing a lot about DevSecOps, but maybe not as much implementation yet. So I think, I wonder if it's early days still.
I mean, there is no guidelines, right?
Right.
Everyone can say DevSecOps, and it
Sure.
may be an IT security, a network security, or application security. The goal, the idea about DevSecOps is how do we do security in DevOps, and whatever solution you bring, if it makes you more secured, that's DevSecOps.
Yeah.
There is no, now I'm DevSecOps compliant, let's say. I feel on that sense that some of those solutions is just make you feel good, right? Hey, you're running scanning. Is it any good for me? I don't know. I'm securing your network. Do you really secure, or do you just not try to annoy me and do something easy?
Right, right. Well, what about the data analytics that is associated, especially with monitoring and logging and all of these security practices that are just so data intensive. I kind of feel like we're giving organizations too much data these days that they can parse, and they can sift through and find the intelligence behind. So how do you feel about that? And is that something that you're hearing from your customers? You're laughing at me, so I don't know.
Actually, I mean, when you ask me, I feel more as the customer, not as the vendor, because my information is being harvested, right, all over the place, with many vendors that are using it. And while they don't ask me if I'm allowing that, it's even worse if they don't do the real DevSecOps and secure my data.
Right, right.
I look at my customers, also my vendors, I mean, my bank, my streaming service. I want them to do the due diligence and do the effort to secure, to secure my data. That's why, the tool that you're using, it's not enough the tool, it's not enough the process. You have to have both of them.
Right.
So,
but when they, when they collect that information and they just hold on to it, they don't do anything with it, and then we get into a situation where they have so much data, they actually don't know what they have.
Yeah.
And then that, to me, kind of opens up the possibility or the probability that at some point that data is going to get leaked out, and your personal information is going to, be out there for the world to see. And it seems like we have a true data problem.
Yes.
Regardless of whether we're talking about DevSecOps or we're just talking about data collection in general, by apps and banks and any sort of program. So, do you think that we're going to hit the wall when it comes to data collection? I mean, is there?
I feel that GDPR did the step in that direction.
Yeah.
Right? We have a cloud solution, for example, and initially we said, hey, let's collect everything, all the analytics, we will make our cloud better. GDPR came and make you start thinking. And the guideline is, if you don't know that you need this, don't collect it.
Right.
And if you do need it, if you think that you need it, can you get that information in a different way? It slows down development, let's face it, right? Technology, then you have a new idea, you just now start to collect the data. But we need to be mindful, right? We don't want to collect information. I don't want people to collect information about me if it's not really needed for that vendor, for that. We don't want it to be sold to third parties, right?
Right. And that's a big thing. That's a big problem right now, where all these third-party companies that are collecting that data and then selling it to whoever wants to buy it, So
I mean, it's not just in devs, right?
No,
when you go and
it's
buy a house, buy a car,
oh yeah,
you need to opt out for so many things, because otherwise all your information flowing.
Yeah. It's tricky. It's a very tricky balance that we, even just everyday consumers are dealing with. How much information of mine do I want to have out there? So for convenience sake, so that they'll have my credit card on file, or so I can do quicker checkouts and things like that. It's like, how do you strike that balance? So
Yeah, and most end consumers, when I speak with friends and family, is not from the industry, they say, so I don't care.
Yeah,
so they have the information.
I have nothing
What?
to hide.
Exactly, right? But people are making money from that nothing to hide.
Right, exactly.
And if they're not doing the due diligence in DevSecOps, it's not just them. Someone else is stealing that information.
Right.
And it's not about impersonation or anything. It's way more than just our data is the new currency, right?
Right.
So
Right. I mean, they can track you wherever you go, and even what transactions you make, and it seems to me that especially when we're talking about application security,
Yeah.
the need to have that data.
You're referring too much.
Yeah.